Jesus made the disciples get into a boat and precede him to the other side of the sea while he dismissed the crowds. After doing so, he went up on the mountain by himself to pray. When it was evening, he was there alone. Meanwhile, the boat, already a few miles offshore, was being tossed about by the waves, for the wind was against it. During the fourth watch of the night, he came forward, walking on the sea. When the disciples saw him walking on the sea, they were terrified. "It is a ghost," they cried, and they cried out in fear. At once Jesus spoke to them. "Take courage, it is I. Do not be afraid." Peter said to him in reply, "Lord, if it is you, command me to come to you on the water." He said, "Come." Peter got out of the boat and began to walk on the water towards Jesus. But when he saw how strong the wind was, he became frightened. And beginning to sink, he cried out, "Lord, save me." Immediately, Jesus stretched out his hands and caught him and said to him, "O you of little faith, why did you doubt?" After they got into the boat, the wind died down. Those who were in the boat did him homage, saying, "Truly, you are the Son of God." After making the crossing, they came to the land at Gennesaret. When the men of that place recognized him, they sent word to all the surrounding country. People brought him all who were sick and begged him that he might touch only their tassels of their cloak. And as many as touched it were healed. The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ.
Good morning.
Good morning.
So we have an extremely long first reading. So obviously the church wants us to take something special away from us. False prophets are always among us. False prophets are always trying to convince people to go their way. And so we have in our first reading the false prophet Hananiah. And he prophesied the destruction of the Babylonian Empire. And if we remember, God had chosen to use that to chastise the Israelites. He exiled them because of their hard-heartedness, their refusal to listen to and follow the commands of God. And so, basically, Hananiah is opposing the will of God. And Jeremiah calls him out on that and lets him know that false prophecies truly lead to people suffering. And that's what he talks about when he says their yoke would go from a wooden yoke to an iron yoke. They would truly be suffering as a result of these claims. And then, of course, the false prophet receives the false prophet's reward, and then he passes away. But we ask ourselves, well, what does this have to do with our gospel reading? I think where the two link is focus. You see, the people lost their focus. The Israelites lost their focus on God. And as a result, they suffered greatly. They suffered exile. They suffered hunger. They suffered slavery. They suffered all the burdens that come with losing sight of what's important in our lives. And then we see St. Peter doing the same thing. He's scared. God calms him. He says, "Here I am, Lord, call me out." And the Lord calls him out. And there he is, walking on the water. But what happens? He loses focus. It's instead of looking intently in the eyes of God, the eyes of Jesus Christ in front of him, he looks about at the world and he begins to sink. So I think our takeaway from today is to maintain our focus on God. No matter what is going on in our world, and we all know there's a lot going on in our world today, our focus needs to be Jesus Christ. See, he is the way and the truth and the life. And as long as our focus is with him, then we will have peace and joy in our hearts. Now, that is not to say that our lives will be easy, that our lives will be without burden. Because we are in a world where there is suffering, and we have to accept that as part of it. But it is by linking that suffering to Christ that we find our salvation. And the more we focus on Christ, the more we come to the realization that we are simply passing through this life. And no matter what happens in it, it's not important, because the ultimate goal is to be with Christ. The ultimate goal is to be like Peter, our hands on Christ, focused for the glory of God.